So I'm way too insecure to use my slides if they're going to freak out like everybody else's. So
You gave us yours on time.
oh, okay. I might just not use them. Also because I had a whole presentation planned, and then the discussion today has led me to rethink my perspective on pretty much everything. But just to give you an overview, my name is Nicole Martens, and I head up Africa and the Middle East for the Principles for Responsible Investment. Principles for Responsible Investment, or PRI, is a UN-supported initiative. It's led by investors, and it's helping investors who have made the commitment to implement environmental, social, and governance factors into their investment processes. The issue of a just transition is something that comes up a lot in these conversations, especially in markets like ours, where signatories will, just to give you a sense, for example, say, I'd like to be a responsible investor, so I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't invest in Eskom, right? Because environmentally and governance-wise, it's a horrific investment. But if I pull out my money, hundreds of thousands of people will be without jobs because the economy will shut down, and is that not also irresponsible? And these are the kinds of questions that investors are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So just before I get into anything specific, can I get a show of hands who in this room is representing an investor of some kind, so an asset manager, an asset owner, or great. And is there anyone who is advising investors, so consultants, ESG consultants, or asset consultants? Okay, and that's part of the problem. So sitting in the room today and having a look around, one of the things that's really warms my heart is seeing a lot of familiar faces and being able to greet everyone and say, good morning, oh, it's been such a long time. But that's also terrifying for me because it feels like we're the same people having the same conversations in the same echo chambers consistently. And it's starting to drive me a little bit crazy. So I think that's something that we need to work on, and it's something that, pulling on from what's been raised earlier today, it's about understanding what are the systems that are currently in play, and how do we use the incentives and the power that each of us have and that are working to affect this change. And I think if that's what you take away from this quick presentation, is that each person in this room has got something that you can do today, so a practical thing we can do. I mean, Jesse laid out the plethora of things we need to do, the initiatives that we'll need to run in order for us to get this done. And it can be quite overwhelming when you think about it, especially if you think that, you know, at a state level, we can't even get water and power to everybody. So how the hell are we going to do this? It's not easy, and it's going to require effort from everyone. But hopefully, with what we talk about here, we can help. So the PRI does a lot of things with respect to responsible investment ESG. That's sort of our bread and butter. We produce literal guidebooks and handbooks for investors. So what is best practice in responsible investment for fossil fuels, or for specific asset classes, or specific geographies, or with respect to specific environmental, social, or governance issues? And we've been doing a lot of work when it comes to the just transition. I don't have the clicker. Thanks. One of the things that we did last year, which I think is incredibly relevant to this conversation, when we were talking about the fact that the question is no longer will the transition happen, the question is will it be just? Last year, PRI ran an engagement with our stakeholders, which includes our signatory base, which at the moment is 2,500 signatories, so investors around the world that are representing about $90 trillion in assets under management. So that's over half of global institutional investment. We ran an engagement with them and with stakeholders, so industry experts and academics, to get a sense of where we might be going at a global level. And the overwhelming consensus was that in a couple of years, when we do the global stock take for the Paris Agreement, we're going to realize that we are so far behind where we need to be that the only rational way forward will be for there to be dramatic and very disruptive policy and regulatory intervention. And the big question we need to ask ourselves is whether we're ready for that. When it comes to the drivers of responsible investment or ESG integration, when you look at a world map, the biggest driver across markets is risk mitigation. People understand that integrating ESG is a way for you to mitigate risks, to get a sense of what might the downside be of me not taking this into account. In every market except South Africa, the second most popular driver is client demand. So people are asking more of their funds. They're saying, I want to retire well, but I also want to know what kind of world I'm retiring into, and what are you as my investor doing on that? In South Africa, the second most powerful driver is regulation. So on one hand, that's great, because when the inevitable policy response comes, people will move. The other is we might be waiting for that. which is terrifying. So we can acknowledge that things are happening, but they're not happening fast enough. Investors are taking a stand. We saw from the previous questions about who is leading in the market. I think there's some very clear leaders who are trying, but it's not enough. Also, we were talking about what are the justifications for investors to care about a just transition. I think we've covered that, and again, this is the room of the converted, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. But it's about understanding the risks and the opportunities that you face. It's about better understanding the societal impact that you can have, not because it's a moral or an ethical concern, because it's the right thing to do, but because as a universal owner of an asset in an increasingly globalized world, you are impacted and you impact on global events. And so if we can't understand these things, if we can't get a sense of where we're going, we are going to make poor investment decisions. At the end of the day, if you're not taking the just transition into account, you are introducing unnecessary environmental, social, and governance risk into your portfolio. Simple as that. So PRI has started a partnership with a couple of institutions that are leading in the space when it comes to the just transition. And one of the things that we've put out recently is a guidebook. So I'm happy for Joshua to share my presentation in like a PDF form, and I've put hyperlinks in there so that you can click it and you can read it. And one of the things that you can do as an investor or as an advisor to investors or as someone with a pension fund is to get your investment team to read this guide. It's not the answer to all your questions. It's an infinitely complex issue, as we know, but it gives you really good starting points. It breaks it down into 5 action points for investors, right? It's about integrating ESG, promoting it, and engaging on the issue for just transition, and having a really clear understanding of how it manifests in your market and then therefore in your portfolios. Okay, so to break it down really simply, there are 2 things you can do today. So I know it's been very overwhelming when we hear about everything that needs to happen, but if it makes you feel at all better and empowered, here are 2 things you can do, and they are hyperlinked, so you can click it in the presentation. I've made it so easy. The first thing is read the guide. It's very user-friendly, and the second thing is get your whoever's managing your money to sign the investor statement on the just transition. It is a commitment by investors not to divest entirely from fossil fuels tomorrow, which is completely impractical, but to work toward a just transition, not just in their market, but a global one, right, as universal owners of assets. At the moment, we have 143 investors signed up, representing about $9 trillion US, which is, well, it's a global one. There's nothing to stop us, and thanks for that, because at the end of this month, PRI is launching on our collaboration platform, the PRI African Investor Forum, which will be a collaboration platform, basically like a mixture between Facebook and LinkedIn for investors, not just signatories, but investors based in Africa and those based outside of Africa but with significant holding on the continent, to exchange ideas like this and to initiate projects like that. So absolutely, we can have a local one, and maybe we should. But the idea is to get people committed to this idea, right? Not just, I was saying to Rain earlier, I'm at a point, I'm just very tired, I've been traveling a lot, but I'm at a point now where I'm so sick of people telling me they care about this issue and then doing nothing, not even clicking the hyperlink that I sent them. So it's super simple. It is super simple, and those are 2 things that you can do today. So I just wanted to make sure that if we are going to end, we end on something practical and hopeful, and that is it. A note on this Just Transition investor statement. We have, as PRI, also initiated a Just Transition working group of investors who are tirelessly meeting and discussing and researching ways that investors can play a bigger role in this space. And at the moment, there's not a single emerging market represented on that working group. So South African investors, here with my challenge, if you do care, please sign the thing and join the group so that we can be part of the conversation, because if we're not, all of the projects that come, all of the recommendations that are made are going to be provided to you by investors who are dealing with the mining issue of fossil fuel industries in Australia or Canada, which is completely different and makes no sense here. So those would be my 2 quick things. I just want to check if there's anything else in my notes, because I obviously wrote down some stuff. No, that is the only thing. I just wanted to end as well with just, earlier there was a note made about how we shouldn't focus too much or only on climate change. And I hear that a lot. And especially in in emerging markets, and especially in South Africa, where we'll spend hours and hours talking about not just climate change, but the climate emergency and how important it is that we get our act together with respect to this issue, only to be told, but we don't care about climate change, we care about jobs. Or we don't care about climate change, we care about inequality. Fair enough. Climate change exacerbates every other issue. If you care about inequality, you care about climate change. If you care about jobs, if you care about gender equality, you have to care about this issue. Because at the end of the day, and I know it's a very cliche, but there's no returns on a dead planet, there's no jobs, there's no equality, there's no nothing. So I would just like to say that, as my closing note, and this I should probably say is not explicitly the view of the PRI, it might be my personal view. But people, we have conversations with trustees all the time, and people will say, no, but trustees only care about returns. They don't care about ESG. They don't care about impact. Another clarifier I have to make is that if you care about returns, you care about ESG. It doesn't matter if you care about impact or not. That will naturally sort of come. But if you care about returns, you care about ESG. If you care about returns, you care about climate change. That is it. Thank you very much.